I fear mediocrity. I worry that Britain as a country is becoming a very mediocre nation, and we've got a lot of very mediocre people running things and wanting to make their mark by making all kinds of changes that are just for the sake of change. So like that thing we were watching a minute ago, when I was watching the House of Lords, that was a debate on Lords reform. And they want to make it an elected house, make it like a Senate, you know, like the Americans have. And I just think, why?
Because they're talking about presidency as well, aren't they?
No, well, there have been calls for the Prime Minister to be directly elected, rather than, you know, at the moment the Prime Minister is just elected like any other MP, and the Queen invites whichever MP happens to be leader of the winning party to be the Prime Minister. But they are called the Prime Minister should be directly elected, just like the President of the United States. But it won't work. And they keep doing this. They keep trying to bring in things that are part of the American way of doing things, which is totally different to us. We're a parliamentary democracy, and they are an executive presidency. It's a completely different system of government. And things like an elected House of Lords is going to add nothing to the way we do politics in this country, absolutely nothing. Why do we want another chamber of Parliament that's composed in exactly the same way as the House of Commons? You know, people aren't exactly keen on MPs anyway. What do we want a whole other chamber of Parliament filled with people just like them? The House of Lords at the moment, it's got a lot of old buffers, and I can understand why people were against the idea of hereditary peers. Someone just inheriting a seat in Parliament because they happen to be somebody's son or grandson or great-grandson or whatever. But the House of Lords has got a lot of experts in it. A lot of people who get made lords are people like Lord Winston, the scientist that does all those TV shows. Lord Ricks, who's the president of MENCAT. Lots like charity workers and stuff. Heads of charities get made lords. Former generals, chief of the defence staff, former Lord Chief Justices, and people like that, experts. Former diplomats, scientists, doctors. And I think that's the kind of people you want in the second chamber, which is supposed to be the revising chamber anyway. It doesn't need to be directly elected. It doesn't produce any primary legislation. It just reviews the legislation that comes out of the House of Commons, the legislation that the elected politicians produce. So I think if we elect the Commons, we don't need to elect the Lords as well. I think the last thing that people in this country want is another chamber of Parliament filled with a load of elected party politicians. They don't want it, do they?
So what's your concern then if
we just end up with at the moment we've got an ancient system of government that's tried and tested, it works, why mess with it? It's just change for the sake of making a load of changes, and I don't think it adds anything to our polity. Like recently, we've now got a Supreme Court, did you realise that?
No.
Most people don't even notice it happening, but we now have a Supreme Court. For years and years and years, centuries, the House of Lords was the highest court in the land because it had the law lords in it. It's called, the full posh title was called the Appellate Committee. And the Appellate Committee sat as the Supreme Court. It was made up of senior judges who'd been given peerages and they sat in the House of Lords. And the Appellate Committee was run on a budget of tens of thousands of pounds. The new Supreme Court has a multi-million-pound budget. It had a new purpose-built building, and it does exactly the same job as the Appellate Committee did. So what have we gained? Nothing. We've gutted the Middlesex Guildhall, which was this ancient building in the centre of London. It has that awful, what's his name, Lord Foster, I think, or Lord Foster or Lord Rogers, I can't remember, one of them, modern architects, gutted it to turn it into the Supreme Court. And we've just got a load of people sitting in a purpose-built building that's cost millions, and it does exactly the same job as the Appellate Committee did. And it also meant the Appellate Committee, because they were all lords, it meant that when they retired at 75 or whatever it is, they became what's known as Lords of Appeal. So they're kind of like how like a retired teacher sometimes comes in and takes over classes and stuff, and it's like a supply teacher, even though they're sort of technically retired. That's what the retired law lords were like, because they're still sitting in the House of Lords. They weren't allowed to. I don't think they're allowed to vote on judgments, but they're allowed to speak. So you still had the benefit of their wisdom. And I think it's always good if the legislature has senior judges in it, because obviously they're the people that are going to have to interpret the law when it's passed anyway. And we've lost that link now. We've lost that link between the highest, like the legislature, the second chamber of the legislature, and the judiciary. For what? Why? Just to look hip, if you boil it down. When you boil it down to its key parts, that's all it boils down to. It's just they want to say, because it's modern and we want to be a progressive democracy. I'm not interested in being a progressive democracy. I'm interested in what works.
Don't ever ask my brother about politics again. Note to self. Right, moving on.
So you asked me about my fears, and we still managed to get on to politics. But
All right. We're done fears. What do you love?
What do I love?
Yeah.
I love good breakfast. I love Britishness. It's very kind of quintessentially English.
The non-BNP way, of course.
Yeah. No, I hate the BNP. No, I love the, pub grub. Watching the cricket. Being played by complete amateurs.
I must say, you're very much a traditionalist in every respect.
Well, yeah. I the things I love about my day-to-day life are very kind of folkish and old-fashioned. I like smoking my pipe. I'm 28 years old, and I smoke a pipe. I've kind of given up on modernity a long time ago.
Don't forget the canes as well, the walking sticks.
I don't really collect them anymore, but
a pocket watch.
I do still wear my pocket watch.
Yeah, the hats as well.
I don't really have any hats.
Well, you did.
I did used to collect hats.
Look at this actually.
My top hat.
Top hat. Is this Nan's?
I think it was Nan's father's. There's kind of a nice juxtaposition up on that shelf because I've got the top hat there.
I'll show you what you mean.
And on the other side, that's a Soviet Air Commodore's hat, I think, or whatever their equivalent rank is. It's a USSR Air Force cap. Either side of a bust of Winston Churchill.
The irony, eh?
He was no great fan of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I'm going to say. Cool. Right, so that's what you love. Now we'll move on to what makes you laugh.
What makes me laugh? Considering I'm a bit of a traditionalist, I do quite like irreverent humour. Like that joke Frankie Boyle made about the Queen. We all know which one we're talking about, we don't need to repeat it.
We'll say no more.
That made me howl, absolutely howl with laughter. I like South Park.
I mean, it's
Anything with Will Ferrell in.
I think it's good as well that you are a traditionalist, but you can also see, the comical element to it.
I've got a sense of humour. I don't need to be, I'm not too much of a sucker. One of the things I love the Queen and the monarchy, and I love, trooping the colour and changing the guard and state opening of Parliament and all that kind of thing. And I really respect her personally as well. But it doesn't mean I can't laugh at someone making a funny joke about her. Or like on Mock the Week when when they have like some footage of the Queen visiting somewhere, and Hugh Dennis does all the voiceovers. He did the brilliant one at the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So, you've got a terrific pair of norks. It was really funny. And on Have I Got News For You and stuff like that. They do take the piss, but I think it's funny. And I quite like that shocking humour. That really makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Like South Park, the way South Park just got more and more kind of, oh my word, I can't believe they just said that. I love that.
I don't think you think to yourself whenever you watch a new episode, you think they can't get anything
They
wrong.
can't possibly top this. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. And then next week they do something even more horrendous. It makes me absolutely wet.
In a few short years, it has become an internet and social phenomenon.
Well, I think that's good.